Hi everyone. Welcome to our video about the East India Company. The East India Company was one of the most powerful and influential organizations in world history, and its impact can still be felt today. In this video, we'll take a deep dive into the history of the East India Company, from its incorporation to its ultimate downfall. The East India Company was incorporated in 1600 by a group of English merchants and was granted a royal charter by Queen Elizabeth I. The company's mission was to trade with the East Indies and to find new markets for English goods. Initially, the company focused on trading spices, silk, and other luxury goods, but it quickly expanded into other areas such as textiles and tea. As the East India Company's power and influence grew, it was given additional powers by the British government. For example, the company was granted the right to mint its own coins, to establish its own armies, and to make treaties with foreign powers. These powers allowed the East India Company to exert control over large portions of India, and by the late 1700s, the company had become one of the dominant powers in the region. The East India Company's rise to wealth and power was a result of a number of strategic moves. Firstly, the company established a monopoly over trade between Britain and India, which allowed it to control the flow of goods and set prices. Secondly, the company developed close relationships with local rulers and officials, who granted them special privileges and helped them to expand their trade and influence. Thirdly, the company built a powerful military force, which allowed it to control and protect its trading interests and to expand its territories. The company's army was made up of both European and Indian soldiers, and it was considered one of the most powerful military forces in the world at the time. One of the key ways that the East India Company amassed wealth and power was through the exploitation of India's resources. The company gained control over large areas of land and resources in India, and it used these resources to enrich itself and its shareholders. For example, the company controlled the production and export of India's most valuable commodities, such as cotton, indigo, and opium, and it set prices and taxes to maximize its profits. The company also imposed a number of other taxes and fees on the Indian people, which further increased its wealth. For example, the company collected customs duties, land taxes, and tolls, and it even had the power to enforce its own laws and punishment. The total value of resources exploited by the East India Company from India is difficult to estimate, but it was certainly massive. The company's profits from trade with India were estimated to be in the tens of millions of pounds sterling, and the company's shareholders became some of the wealthiest and most influential people in Britain. The exploitation of India's resources by the East India Company had a profound impact on the Indian economy and society. The company's policies contributed to widespread poverty, famine, and disease, and they left a lasting legacy of exploitation and inequality in India. Unfortunately, the East India Company's rule was also marked by many atrocities and crimes. One of the most notorious examples was the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, which took place in Amritsar, India in 1919. On April 13, British soldiers opened fire on a crowd of peaceful protesters, killing hundreds of innocent people. This horrific event is considered one of the darkest moments in the history of British rule in India. The East India Company's rule was also characterized by widespread corruption, exploitation, and abuse of power. Company officials and military personnel enriched themselves at the expense of the Indian people, and the company's policies contributed to widespread poverty, famine, and disease. The company's power and influence rapidly declined, and in 1858, the British government took control of India and officially ended the company's rule. The decline of the East India Company was a major factor in the eventual withdrawal of the British from India. In 1857, a major uprising known as the Indian Rebellion of 1857 broke out, which challenged British rule and demonstrated the growing opposition to British rule. In response, the British government decided to take direct control of India and to dismantle the East India Company, which had become a liability. The withdrawal of the British from India was a gradual process, which took several decades to complete. During this time, the British government implemented a series of reforms and policies, which aimed to modernize and stabilize the country. These policies included the introduction of a new system of government, the introduction of Western-style education, and the development of infrastructure and industry. In conclusion, the East India Company was a powerful and influential organization that had a profound impact on world history. Its rule in India was marked by atrocities, crimes, and widespread corruption, and it serves as a reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and greed. Despite its dark history, the East India Company remains a fascinating and important part of world history, and its legacy continues to be studied and debated by scholars and historians today. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more great content.